I managed to get them both with my pocket knife because I'm a junkyard ninja. Smith & Wesson. A little bit of a chore, but if you can do it in the rust, in the mud, in the junkyard, in the Rust Belt of Canada, then you can do it anywhere. Most common reason for removing the axle would be a bad U-joint, or if you want to replace the U-joint or replace the axle. So there she is. She's in good condition. I recommend a new U-joint if you're gonna have it apart. Maybe that rubber right there. There she is, right there. I gotta pull the axle out of this K5 Suburban half-ton, and I figure I'd take you along for the ride. So good news is there's already, the hubcap's already missing, which is the locking hubcap, but that's only 6 little nuts. That's no big deal. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's not a real big job if you have the right tools and a little bit of patience. So I'm gonna take the wheel off, and I think there's a snap ring. Yeah, there's a snap ring on the axle, and there might be a snap ring around the outside too as well. So I'll make sure both of those snap rings are off, and this inner gear should slide out. Okay, I got that snap ring off of the end of the axle, and there is another one around the outside. This one is tricky to get. I managed to get them both with my pocket knife because I'm a junkyard ninja. Smith & Wesson. So I got this one off of the axle, and I got this one from the outside of the hub here, and you got to get both of those out. If I had the screws for the locking hub, I would put a screw in, and I'd use the screw for a handle, and I would just pull this out now. But I don't have the screws. Somebody already removed the locking cap. So I'll see if I can pull this out or pry this out now. It's a lot easier if you have the screws to pull on. I didn't even bring a screwdriver, but I got this broken pry bar that I found. So I had to pry on both sides. Like I said, it's a lot easier if you have those screws, because you just put a screw in there and pull on the screw. But anyway, there's that ordeal. Ooh, patent number. So next, I guess the caliper will have to come off, because the hub won't come off without the caliper. There's 2 bolts, one here and one here. They go in from behind, and they're actually a hex. They're like a 3/8, yeah, 3/8 hex, I believe they are. So I'll see if I can get those out. And in here there should be 2 nuts. They're a big weird kind of nut. Yeah, there's 2 big weird nuts in there. 3/8. The one I need is missing. What the fuck? They were 3/8 Allen hex, and I found I found one. So I got them out. They were a little bit snug, but no major deal. So once you get those out, then the caliper can come off. It might be stuck. Yeah, it's probably stuck from sitting. Go figure. Might have to give it a swat with a hammer. Okay, so I got the caliper off and the locking hub out. So now let's talk about funny nuts. there's two funny nuts in there, and they lock up against each other, and you can't really get a normal socket on them, but they have notches in them. So there is a tool for that, and it looks like this. So there is a socket that has these notches in it. This is a universal one. It has 6 and 4, 2 different sizes. But if you find the notch, there it is there. But I've done it without these before. You can do it without these. It's not the best way, but it works if you're in a pinch. So if you take a hammer and chisel and hit in a certain direction, hit that direction, it'll spin it that way, right? So see how I'm hitting it and it's turning counterclockwise? That's what I want to do. I want to turn it counterclockwise. So these nuts, sometimes you can get a little something in there on an angle, and sometimes you can hit them with a hammer on an angle and that'll knock the nut loose. So I'm gonna try it with this broken, just to show you that you don't need special tools necessarily. So I'm just gonna try it with this and see if I can get it loose. So I'm just gonna take the hammer and tap it sideways like that. Same idea in there. Wish I had brought the tripod so I could show you, but see how it's turning there now? It's hard for me to aim the camera and operate the tool and look in there at the same time, but I did it. Friggin' did it. Very similar to the chisel on the Ranger, on the leaf spring center pin. Very similar, but I'm not trying to split this nut. I'm just trying to turn it, trying to rotate it. So if I can find the notch here. There she goes, yeah. So I did it with the hammer and I got it rotating that nut. So this is the tool you're supposed to use. It's all covered in grease and grass, but there are different sizes. There's one there, it's a different size. But this one's universal. It has 6 lugs on it and 4 on the inside. So there's different sizes. But just to show you that you don't necessarily need special tools. I could keep spinning it loose with the screwdriver now that it's loose, and I did knock it loose with the screwdriver. But it's like that. That's the way it is. There's gonna be 2 of them, and they lock up against each other, and that stops your hub from coming off. But before the second nut comes off, there's a locking plate that has to come off first, and that makes the locking plate goes into a dowel pin, and it stops them from rotating. So I'll have to pull that off of the dowel pin. It should just come off. Oh yeah, she's loose. So you got to get that washer out of there first. It's a funny looking lock washer, but it just slides there. It just slides off. And I'll have to reach in there and pull it out of there. Getting everything covered in grease. My fingers and my phone. But here it is. It just pulls straight off. But it does have a keyway on the inside. So you gotta wiggle it, and you can't really rotate it. You just have to wiggle it and pull it straight out. And then there's gonna be another nut. And that'll be the last one. This one should be easier to remove. It shouldn't be as tight as the lock nut. So this one should come off pretty easy. Once I get the second nut off of here, the whole hub is going to be loose and it's just going to slide right off the spindle. This is the set nut that sets the tension on your wheel bearing. And the second one that I already removed, it's a lock nut and it just holds the proper tension on your wheel bearing. There she is. You got both nuts off. So now it doesn't really look like it's falling off, but deep down inside it's falling off. And there might be a hub seal on the inside, so if you can support it a little bit and pull it straight out, and yeah, just support the weight a little bit so it doesn't drag on the hub seal, and then it'll just come off. Ugh. Just like that. And there's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nuts. And I think they're 9/16 or 14 millimeter. And they hold the spindle on. And the spindle gives you a place for your bearings to ride on, your outer bearing and your inner bearing. So we're gonna have to knock that spindle off. Sometimes they're fun to get those off, but we can do it. First step is gonna be to remove those nuts, and then we're probably gonna have to persuade it. Okay, I got those 6 bolts off and knocked the backing plate off. So now the spindle is still here, and these can be a bugger. They can be tight. So I usually knock them off with brute force, but you have to be careful not to hit the bearing races. So there's an inner race for the inner bearing, the smooth shiny spot, and there's an outer race here and the threads. So you don't want to hit any of that. What you can do is you can hit in between these 2 races. There's just a bumpy spot, and that's just a void in between, covered in grease here. So I'll take a flat bar that has flat sides, and I'll lay it in the safe spot in between. I don't want to hit this race, I don't want to hit this race, I don't want to hit the threads, but in between. And sometimes I'll just hit straight down on it, on the flat, and sometimes it'll knock it loose here. Another way you might be able to do it is with a chisel. You might be able to chisel it in between here and open it up here. But these can be they can be tight. So I'm just gonna smack it a couple times with a hammer, but very carefully, and I'm gonna avoid all these spots here. Okay, I rattled it back and forth a few times, and just enough that there's a crack. It's starting to open up here. So I've been hitting it hard, and I've been hitting it several times, and it's just barely moving. So they're really on there. They're on there really good. So I'm just gonna keep hitting it. I think I got a bigger gap on this side, so I'm putting a wedge in there. There's my knife. My knife gets used hard every day. Okay, I've been pounding on it, and I think, yep, there she is. She is tight into that step there. These things can be a pain in the butt, but if you're careful and have a little bit of patience and persistence and persuasion. So the axle should come out now, but I have to straighten out the steering first, I believe. Let's set this down here somewhere. Just have to straighten out the steering and the axle should slide out. Let me tell you, she's a little bit of a chore. But if you can do it in the rust, in the mud, in the junkyard, in the Rust Belt of Canada, then you can do it anywhere. So I got the steering, I think it's straight now. I guess it's not quite straight, but let me tell you, the steering is tight on this truck. And yeah, no power steering because it doesn't run. I think somebody was trying to fix it up, but I think the frame turned out to be bad, and there was something else. Oh, it's got a big dent in the driver's side too, so I'm not sure. It's kind of a cool truck. Anyway, I had to pull out this tiny little screw because, believe it or not, it was holding that axle in there. See that hole right there? I guess that's a grease fitting plug or something maybe. Look at this, I'm just friggin' covered in grease. Terrible. So believe it or not, that hole is so tight, nice and tight, so tight that it won't fit in there with a grease fitting. So I just took that out, flat screwdriver, and there's the axle. There's the U-joint. Most common reason for removing the axle would be a bad U-joint, or if you want to replace the U-joint or replace the axle. So there she is. She's in good condition. I recommend a new U-joint if you're gonna have it apart. Maybe that rubber right there, hub seal or whatever that is. But there she is right there. Square body Chevy with Ford seats. I'm pretty sure those are Ford seats. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that that's a Ford seat, I think. This truck has kind of nice carpet in it. Somebody made a custom headliner console. Huh. I think that's out of a S10 Blazer.